Islam prophesies the end of Israel and the coming of the end times. So what does the Christian Bible say? Zechariah 14 says, "A day of the Lord is coming when the plunder will be divided among you." What that means is the money collected by the government, the collected resources of a country, will be scattered. In modern terms, what that means is the economy will be in recession and services provided by the government, the police, state benefits and such, pensions, will not be functioning. And people will be at each other's throats, fighting over the scraps. 2. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women taken will be raped. And I think this is a direct reference to what happened on October the 7th, the Hamas invasion, where indeed the city was captured, although it was taken back, houses were ransacked, and women were taken, and have reportedly been abused in that way. 3. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. This refers to the coming of bad weather and plagues, and we are actually seeing that. There's been heavy rains leading to floods, and there has been a drought leading to a loss of food sources in the Middle East. 4. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley with half of the mountain moving north and half moving south. Now, the Mount of Olives is an actual real place. It's exactly on the border of where Gaza now sits, and there's a main road that splits it through the mountain between north and south, and I think that's what this is referring to. It's an area where there is constant fighting, or at least there was until Israel withdrew before their ceasefire. Although they will be returning to that now that the terms of that ceasefire have been broken, with Iranian missile strikes and then further strikes in the north just yesterday. 5. You will flee by my mountain valley. You will flee as if you fled from an earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and the holy ones with him. I think this is a direct reference to the UN aid convoy route, the main road, which does indeed travel through the area that used to be known as Azel. Saying you will flee as if from an earthquake just means you will run away, you won't stop to collect your things or think of anything else apart from your safety, and in a direct straight line you will flee the hills to safety, and that's exactly what's happened. Again, the coming of the Lord my God is a reference to the end of the dry season, which is mid-October to November, and the coming of the rains. That's what it means when it says the Lord my God will come. It means the rainy season. Typically, during a war, the rainy season is when you stop attacking and you restock your troops, because it's difficult to fight when the terrain is muddy and wet, and it's much easier to defend. And that's what they're talking about there. They're saying the attacks on Israel will stop, and Israel will mount their counterattack between October and November going forward. And the holy ones with him mean those who rise up against the collected nations in defence of Israel. Modern day Azel just means the road that leads from Gaza back to the head of Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ was born. On that day a flood of living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western sea, both in summer and in winter. To the east of Israel lies only the Dead Sea, and to the west the Mediterranean. So what I think that means is a great flood will come and clear the mess from the battles, clear the troops, leaving empty ground for people to reoccupy. So if the war is on and then is cleared by the end of the rainy season, that means March, because March is the beginning of the dry season. So I think what this is telling us is from the middle of October to November, there's going to be a big war, a fight in Israel, for Israel, where the collected nations fight against Israel and her allies. And that confrontation will largely be over by the end of March in the following year. 10. The whole land from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, will become like the desert, but Jerusalem will be raised up and remain in its place, from Benjamin Gate to the site of the first gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the royal wine presses. It shall be re-inhabited, never again will it be destroyed, and Jerusalem will be secure. This is telling us that the surrounding areas are going to be destroyed by the war, completely devastated, and they will look like deserts, but then Israel will regenerate their borders and actually expand into those desolate areas and rebuild them into habitable places. Now, given those records, we can plot where the battle will begin, which is this point here, and the area that will be affected if these things are to come to pass and continue to be true as they have been so far. Using these records from the Bible, we can plot that if the battle begins where it says it is going to begin, and then goes up north towards the Golan Heights, and the Golan Heights is a good strategic platform for any military attack, and in fact, if it was taken by a military force, you would need to use like a chemical or maybe a nuclear weapon, a bomb, in order to clear that area so that you could retake it. So perhaps that is what they're talking about in the next section we're going to read. 12. The Lord will strike with a terrible plague all the nations that fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet, their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. On that day, men stricken by the Lord with great panic will each seize the hand of another, and they will attack each other in panic. It continues, Judah too will fight at Jerusalem. The wealth of all the surrounding nations will be collected, great quantities of gold, silver, and clothing. And a similar plague will strike the horses and the mules, the camels and the donkeys, and all the animals in those camps. So if we transpose that with modern day geography and modern day military equipment, there wouldn't so much be camels, donkeys and horses. What that would be referring to is military armoured vehicles, jeeps and such, and weapons of war. The area in which Old Jerusalem used to populate is now actually where Gaza stands today. So Judah will fight at Gaza is what that means. It means Israel will move up and actually retake Gaza, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be collected. That will mean the aid that's pouring in from all the other countries in the world, the great quantities of gold, silver and clothing. So again, if this is to be believed, if these prophecies continue to be true, what this says is the end of the war in March will happen when Israel move up back into Gaza, retaking Rafah, retaking the Golan Heights, and then are attacked again by Syria and Iran and their allies with a chemical weapon or possibly a nuclear weapon, and then the final battle will end when they retake the Golan Heights. The floods happen which will clear the lands, everything's turned to desert, and then Israel retake the lands that have been turned into desert, desolated by the weapon, set up a new larger border in expansion of Israel, and then repopulate and re-farm the land, making it habitable once again. And that concludes our reading. So in conclusion, according to the Christian Bible, what's going to happen is there will be a lull, there won't be much fighting, there'll just be attacks coming from the outside to Israel, leading up to the end of the dry season and the rainy season in October, November. Funnily enough, when the election in America is going to happen, and most likely Biden will be ousted and a new president will be installed. Then after that, leading up to March, there will be a great confrontation. Israel will be back in Gaza and Rafah, fighting there and in the Golan Heights, trying to take back their land. The confrontation at the Golan Heights will conclude with a bomb of some kind, a chemical or a nuclear weapon being used. Then there will be a preceding flood which will clear the troops. Israel will move back in with her allies, retake the area, and repopulate in some time the places which have been turned into desert, and that will be the end of the war. So that's what we can tell if the Christian Bible is to be believed. Obviously some people believe it, some don't. It's not a historical document, and this is all prophecies written thousands of years ago. But bearing in mind how accurate they've been, as we've gone through earlier in the video, it's a fair assumption that some of this stuff might happen. And actually, if you are not a religious person at all, and you just know a little bit about strategic military planning, it's fair to say that's probably what's going to happen with regards to the Golan Heights retaking Rafah and the use of chemical and nuclear weapons. So, that's all for today. Hope that puts something in your mind other than what the news is telling you, which is absolute rubbish. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.